All right. Well, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and tuning in this afternoon for this virtual town hall. I'm so happy to be here with my friend, Senator Alex Padilla, this afternoon, so we can talk about our work on two major issues, infrastructure and childcare, that we've been working on in the House and the Senate. But before we get into that, I wanted to say a few words about what's happening in Ukraine. I know for those of us in San Diego, especially, we understand better than most the devastating consequences of war. And I know world events are extra personal as we worry about our loved ones in the military. So first, let me reiterate that President Biden has once again reassured us that US troops will not be going to Ukraine. But that doesn't mean we're standing by as Russia does an unjustified attack on Ukraine that will have deadly consequences for the Ukrainian people and honestly for the entire European continent. When I visited Ukraine with my colleagues last month, it was clear that the United States Congress and the Biden administration, along with our NATO allies, are united in our strong support of the Ukrainian people. And I'm so grateful that President Biden and Secretary Blinken have prioritized diplomacy, have offered Putin every opportunity to take another path. And frankly, it's shameful that Putin was unwilling to seriously engage and find a diplomatic solution. Earlier this afternoon, as you probably heard, President Biden announced a series of sanctions against Russia, and I'll be working closely with the administration to make sure we're holding Putin accountable and that everyday people around the world are impacted as minimally as possible. So with that, I know a lot of you submitted questions about some of the other really big issues in front of us over the last several months and, really over the last year. I've heard from so many of you about the issues that are affecting you and your families. There are two big issues that come up all the time, funding for our crumbling infrastructure and more attention on the childcare crisis. And we hear you. And that's why I'm so happy to be here with Senator Padilla so we can talk about our work on these two issues. So just really quickly, good news is that in November, we passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, and it was signed into law by President Biden. It will provide $550 billion in new funds to repair highways and bridges, expand reliable internet access, and help our communities recover from the devastating impacts of climate change. It includes the largest ever investment in public transit, the largest investment in clean water ever, and the largest investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak, and will create over 2 million jobs nationwide. And we'll be able to see and feel the positive impacts of this bill right here in San Diego. But as many of you know, the bipartisan infrastructure law was only half of the agenda. The other half included one of my top priorities, childcare. And while we passed the Build Back Better Act in the House in November, it is stalled in the Senate, but that doesn't mean the work is over. And I'm still fighting in the House to get a similar package across the finish line, and one that, among other things, addresses climate change with the urgency it deserves and makes significant steps to bolster the care economy and address our childcare crisis. So I'm still fighting. I know Senator Padilla is still fighting. We're excited to be here today to talk about what we've accomplished and what we've still got ongoing. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Senator Padilla.
Great. Well, thank you, Representative Jacobs. It's a pleasure to be with you virtually, hopefully soon in person for one of these. And I too wanted to start with just a few brief remarks on to acknowledge the situation in Ukraine. I think I speak for all of us when I say our thoughts are with the brave people of the Ukraine. Late last night, I spoke with not the ambassador, but the Consul General of the Ukraine, based here in California, in San Francisco, Consul General Kushnaruk, to reaffirm our support for the people of Ukraine. And I want to be clear with all of you that we stand with them and we support President Biden and our allies in imposing the most severe sanctions possible against Putin and his cronies for this unprovoked, unjustifiable, and obviously dangerous attack on an important democratic ally. So let's just keep them all in our thoughts and in our prayers, and hope that we can resolve the situation, comes to an end sooner rather than later. But back to the topic at hand, I'm excited to join you today to talk about a couple of the key issues, as you mentioned, including the impact of the historic bipartisan infrastructure law and what it means for the San Diego region. Working together, and thanks to the law, we're going to see the largest infrastructure investment in nearly a century, including the first ever investment of this scale, anywhere near this scale, in our sustainable future. It means more than $25 billion for California, which makes it like a big number. We're a big state. Yes, we're going to improve our roads, reduce traffic, and improve air quality. But let's kind of break it down. California has already received more than $300 million to upgrade our airports. And that includes a $24 million line item specifically for San Diego International Airport. It is an international city. We know we're talking goods movement, people movement. And so we're going to see some tremendous progress in modernization there. We've secured more than $8 billion to fund water infrastructure throughout the West. And we know in all parts of California how tough the drought has been in recent years. So this funding will go towards building drought resiliency, water recycling programs, which are relatively new. San Diego's been one of the pioneers and innovators in this space. And we're also going to use some of that funding to restore critical ecosystems. So addressing some of the environmental impact of our changing climate. If you paid close attention, you know that the representative's office and my office just last month announced more than $30 million in federal funding to reduce erosion and improve safety of some of the area beaches, including Solana Beach and Encinitas, and another $1.8 million to fund an important study of shoreline erosion in Oceanside. So a lot of that money coming home to the region. And while we worked on the bipartisan infrastructure package and got it to the president's desk, we know that there's a lot that remains to be done. You know, for me, a lot of this is informed by life experience, my travel over the years up and down the state of California, including a more recent infrastructure listening tour. That's why I wanted to make sure to advocate for modernization of the electrical grid, which was successfully done in the bipartisan plan, clean transportation technologies, of course, wildfire mitigation and prevention, but it's just the beginning. As a parent, I do understand the need to invest in child care as an important component, not just for quality of life, but really for our economy. Really tough for people to go back to work if we don't have a safe place to leave our kids when we're doing so, when they're not in school, and not just child care for babysitting sake, but really revolutionizing child care as early learning opportunities and getting our kids ready to thrive when they enter kindergarten and elementary school. So I can go on and on. I will leave it at that. Back to you, Representative Jacobs. Let's get to some questions.
All right, sounds great. Well, I'm excited for this conversation, and I want to thank all of our community members who submitted questions in advance. Our first question comes from John Kay, who asked, what are some ways federal and state funding may benefit San Diego infrastructure? Senator Padilla, I know you covered some of that already, but do you have anything else you wanted my constituents to know about the bill?
Absolutely. You know, and there's probably, you know, line items and laundry lists on your website and my website, which is padilla.senate.gov. But a couple of other specific examples. I mentioned some of the money that's already arrived for the airport, for example. I think over the next 5 years, the total includes $788 million for transit in the region, and $121 million total for San Diego International Airport. You know, one of the great examples, so you know what we talk about when we mean transit. I was there during the recent dedication of the latest segment of the Mid-Coast Corridor Transit Project that is expanding. And so we have an $8 billion increase for the Capital Investment Grants Program. That's the very program that we were able to draw down money for this project. So not just investing in transit, the electrification of transportation and public transit. So it's a win-win. Improving transportation, reducing commute times while making it better for the environment and public health. So a lot more to come.
Well, great. And yeah, that's right. It's amazing that our state is set to receive tens of billions of dollars from this bill, which will be enormously helpful. I know you talked about the airport funding, the erosion funding, the water projects. There's also a new federal program, Safe Streets for All, which will provide $6 billion in competitive grant funding for local governments to reduce crashes and fatalities, which I know for those of us who live kind of in the center of the city of San Diego, is definitely something that's top of mind. And there's also going to be funding for wildfires, which is a big deal for us here. And something I'm really excited about is the funding for broadband coverage. And we've got 100 million in the minimum allocation in state funding for that. So there's a lot more to come.
We all know how, sorry to interrupt, but we all know even more than we did prior to the pandemic, how important that, reliable high-speed internet access is. But I'm glad you reminded me about the wildfires, because when people think of infrastructure, that they may think the electrical grid, transportation for sure, but wildfires, really will, sadly, because of extreme weather, we've seen how failure to invest in our electrical grid can spark wildfires and the damage that it causes, damages to communities, loss of property, loss of lives. So in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, $5 billion for federal land management agencies, and specifically $3.4 billion for wildfire risk reduction projects. So we are better stewards of those public lands, federal and state. We can prevent fires, we can mitigate wildfires when we do have them, save lives, save property, and again, just be better environmental stewards.
Absolutely. And we're very grateful for all the wildfire prevention work that I know you've been working on in the Senate, and I've been partnering with you on the House, because, well, all across California, but here in San Diego, we definitely have felt the impacts of that and know how important those investments are. Let's go on to our second question. So it comes from Janice B., who asked, is there any way to make sure that infrastructure spending goes to the neighborhoods that need it most and not just the wealthy ones that always seem to get the most funding? Is equity being considered at all? And that's a really great question, Janice. Actually, I know it's something that Senator Padilla has been thinking a lot about. I've been thinking a lot about. Just a few weeks ago, Congressman Vargas and I met with the Black American Political Association of California to have a lengthy conversation about just this topic. And I think it's worth saying first, like, people are right to be skeptical, because we know that prior infrastructure packages have not always been great on this issue. And I think here in San Diego, we have examples of that. Senator, I know where you grew up in LA definitely has examples of that. And in cities across the country, highways were built right through existing Black neighborhoods. And hundreds of thousands of people were displaced from 1957 to 1977 for highway construction. And year after year, the Highway Trust Fund, which has been the primary transportation fund, gave 80% of its funds to roads and only 20% to transit. And so we know that these disparities are real. We know they've been exacerbated by federal investment. We see it from everything from what we were just talking about with roads and highways to water infrastructure, in which communities have lead pipes and air pollution and noise mitigation that are needed. But I will say I'm feeling optimistic about this bill for a number of reasons, and I'm grateful that Senator Padilla was in the Senate as this bill was being negotiated to make sure we got some of these important provisions in. So we already talked about the broadband piece that I think is incredibly important. It also makes historic investments in public transit, in water infrastructure, and getting lead pipes out of schools and neighborhoods. And there's actually specific provisions in this bill to address injustices of the past. So it includes $1 billion in funding to reconnect those communities that were broken apart by infrastructure, and $21 billion in funding for cleaning up abandoned oil wells and hazardous waste sites. It's grounded in the spirit of equity, and I know we'll be working closely with the administration as they implement it. They already signed an executive order to set a goal of dedicating 40% of federal investment to underserved communities. That same emphasis is being reflected in the implementation of this bill. So just to give one example, I know the senator mentioned the $24 million for San Diego International Airport. In the FAA's materials, as they rolled out that grant, it clearly states that the FAA will prioritize grant applications that advance equity and sustainability. So a lot of the money will also be coming through the state, and we'll be working closely with our state folks. But I'm also hopeful, because we're having this conversation now, and the senator and I are working proactively to fight for San Diego with our local partners at the city and the county and the state to make sure that we're getting the funding we need, our fair share, but also that it's going to the right place, because I think all of us understand that it'll be important that our communities get their fair share. But Senator Padilla, I'm sure you have something you want to add to that. I know you've done a lot of work on this issue.
Yeah, no, look, you did a great job laying it out. So echo everything that you just mentioned. And I think just to high level uh, uh, sum it up, I mean, it's why we proudly support President Biden's Justice 40 initiative, which is a whole of government effort to deliver at least 40% of the overall benefits from these federal investments in climate and clean energy to historically disadvantaged communities. You know, some of the examples where they decided to build some of the highways really decimated and divided a lot of communities. So we have opportunities to repair that, not just not do it again, but maybe repair the damage of the past. But also think about this, when we're talking about the benefits of these investments, yes, in terms of where and how the infrastructure is built. But a big selling point of this investment is the jobs that we're going to create. So who has access to these jobs? Job opportunities, job training opportunities also have to benefit those communities that have historically not benefited as much or have been completely left out. And it's not just from a job standpoint, a lot of contracting opportunities as well, a lot of disadvantaged, women-owned, veteran-owned small businesses that should be lining up and preparing to benefit from those contracting opportunities, managing the funds or actual contractors on all these jobs, engineering work, design work, construction work, et cetera. So many elements for through inclusivity through these investments. Another sort of side note, because I know it's not part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, but building on the wildfire elements of it, I have a bill known as the Fire Act, which seeks to reform FEMA to better address wildfires. They're pretty good at responding to tornadoes and hurricanes and floods in other parts of the country, but our reality is increasingly wildfires. But there's an equity piece even there too, because we know which communities, especially rural communities, I think North County, Eastern County, San Diego, disproportionately vulnerable, disproportionately impacted when there's devastating wildfires. And if certain communities need a little bit more technical assistance to draw down the relief that they deserve, whether it's a family, whether it's a business owner or a local government, then we need to do a better job of that. So equity in all its forms.
Absolutely right. And thank you for your leadership on that. It's sometimes hard as a Californian. There's 40 million of us and we get 2 senators, but I feel very heartened that we've got you in there fighting for us and fighting for equity. So thank you for that. We're going to move on to our next topic of childcare. And we have a question from Oscar F. What are the House and the Senate doing to fix our childcare system? I know the House passed Build Back Better, but is there any childcare bill that's actually able to pass the Senate too? And I want to turn this over to Senator Padilla. I'm very happy Senator Padilla is here for this question because I can't tell you how many times I get asked about your side of the world, Senator Padilla, when I'm in town halls. I like to joke we did our job, so call your senator. But I do want to actually say, even though I make that joke, that actually Senator Padilla has been a great partner and a great leader for us in California. And those of us in the House have never questioned where his priorities are, whether it was Build Back Better, H.R. 1, the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, the American Dream and Promise Act, all of the things that I get asked about and that we passed and that are sitting in the Senate, Senator Padilla has been fighting for them every step of the way. So I want to make sure that even though I like to joke that you should call your senator, our senator has been doing an amazing job fighting for these issues over there too. But Senator Padilla, I don't know if you want to talk about what childcare things might be possible to get through the Senate.
And that's okay. That's okay. We love taking the calls. We love getting the letters and the emails. So keep sending them our way. But yes, proudly to have been on your side on this childcare issue. I mean, it's the right thing to do, especially feel as I said earlier, because Angela and I are trying to raise 3 gentlemen or 3 boys at various ages, and so we know how critical childcare is. I'm actually optimistic. I mean, Build Back Better, I don't know what the right term is these days, kind of temporary sideline for now. It's going to be back. So many elements of the Build Back Better package that are critical, that are urgently needed. I just don't know if it's going to be a package by some other name, or maybe it's a package of 2 bills or 3 bills. That's still to be determined as we continue to negotiate. But I can tell you this, even some of my Republican colleagues are starting to come forward with their child care proposals. So that's evidence, number one, that the negotiations are active and they continue. Number two, there is bipartisan support for this. So I'm optimistic we'll make progress on childcare in the coming months. I don't know what the final product will look like, but I'm optimistic. You know, it's some people have asked me, well, why do you lump it in with the other infrastructure pieces, whether it's climate or whether it's, you know, healthcare, education, et cetera? You know, shouldn't childcare stand alone? Well, that's one way of looking at it. But a key piece of all this is also how we pay for it. And sometimes those changes to the tax code or, you know, capping what people have to pay out of pocket for prescription drugs. You know, the finance piece is all tied together, which is why childcare was an important element of it. But for any family, any working family, we know that a reliable, accessible, affordable childcare is just as important to us than that internet connection or a safe way to get to and from work. So we're not giving up on childcare. That was important before the pandemic, even more so since the pandemic. And optimistic we're going to make some progress here in the next couple of months.
All right. Well, I'm very happy to hear your optimism. I share it. And if there's anything we in the House can do to help you with that, you
just keep the pressure on. Keep the pressure on.
Yeah, we will definitely keep the pressure on. I also want to highlight a few other things because I know we talk about Build Back Better so much, and I was just as heartbroken as everyone else that we weren't able to get it across the finish line in the Senate. But I do also want to make sure people know that while sometimes the big things that get all of the news feel like there's gridlock, there's actually still a lot going on. And so, for instance, Congresswoman Stephanie Bice from Oklahoma and I have worked really closely on childcare, especially addressing the issue for military families. And she and I worked with Congresswoman Jackie Speer and Senator Tammy Duckworth to introduce the bipartisan bicameral Military Child Care Expansion Act. So there's definitely progress being made in areas where we can work together. I'm also one of the House co-leads on the bicameral Universal Child Care and Early Learning Act and an original co-sponsor of the Child Care for Working Families Act, which I know Senator Padilla, you're also a co-sponsor of. So I just think it's important to say that there are actually a lot of things that are being done and that we still can do, even if all you're reading about in the news is kind of these big packages that feel like they're getting stuck. So our last question comes from Abigail C., who says, I just read about how little childcare workers make. My family pays almost $2,000 a month for our kids. And if the workers aren't getting it, where is all the money going? And if the workers get paid more, does that mean it's going to cost my family and families like mine even more? And Abigail, that's a great question. And it gets to the heart of this problem, which is childcare is incredibly expensive and childcare providers are often making poverty wages. And the high costs come from a lot of places. Some are administrative costs, how much it takes to run a childcare center, licensing fees, the physical space. In California, we have an outdoor space requirement. The providers themselves have to do a significant continuing education and certification, and there are strict guidelines for how many providers are needed per child and per infant. And we think these regulations are important. We want this to be high quality care. We want kids to be in places that are safe. So it's fundamentally a market that doesn't work without government helping it. And that's why I thought the way we did it in the Build Back Better Act was important, because it addressed both of those issues, wages and costs, directly. I was especially proud that one of the provisions I fought for was included in the final bill, which would make sure families in high cost areas like San Diego were able to access the childcare subsidies, because we know that San Diego is a pretty expensive place. And we need to make sure that policies that we write for the entire country consider the cost of living in California, and that San Diego itself is even more expensive than many other California communities. So I was proud we got that provision in. And I guess getting to the heart of your question, Abigail, is the acknowledgement that childcare is expensive. We want the best quality care and facilities for our kids, but that to me is the clearest sign why the government needs to play a role here. And so, you know, I think collectively we accepted that public schools should be free and universal, and the government has a role and responsibility to play to make sure every child can receive a high quality education. And there's no real reason why that shouldn't be the case for early learning and pre-K as well. So Senator Padilla, I don't know if you have something you want to add there.
Yeah, no, it's, again, agree with everything you've mentioned. I guess what I would add is, it's also the reason why through Build Back Better, we're taking such a comprehensive approach to childcare. Some people applauded what we did last year in the American Rescue Plan by expanding the child tax credit, right? That was an immediate help to a lot of families. We lifted up nearly half the children who were living in poverty out of poverty through that single measure alone. And we have a work cut out to continue that and extend that. A child care subsidy or assistance is another element of that. But we also have to invest in the workforce, right? Just because we throw more money at it isn't automatically going to create more spots in your child care center or more child care centers in communities. So if we look at, we're going to need more facilities, more seats, quote unquote, if you will, more child care workers, right? The service providers, not just the organizations and the businesses, but the people providing that care, and better training them, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, so that it's not just a safe place to leave your kids, which is important, but to the extent that we really seamlessly integrate early childhood learning and development, get our kids much better prepared for when they hit kindergarten, when they enter elementary school. It's a win-win-win. Better wages for the providing the care, better quality experience for our children, better educational attainment later on in life, and economic opportunities as they grow up. So it's a kind of comprehensive thinking and approach that we're taking here. And I mean, the need and the justification for the investment speaks for itself.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important point that we sometimes forget. People talk about the price tags of these bills, but really, especially when we're talking about childcare, about pre-K, these are really investments we're making in the future of our economy. And we actually lose about $1 trillion a year in GDP to the cost of childhood poverty. And for every dollar the US government spends on early childhood education, we actually save $7 down the road, because these kids have, as you said, higher wages. They'll therefore will be paying higher taxes, potentially using less services. And so it really is win-win-win. And it's why I think it's so important that we keep fighting. And I'm so grateful that we have you in the Senate to do that. So I see so many more questions coming in, and I'm sorry that we are running out of time to be able to answer them, but I am so grateful, Senator Padilla, that you were able to be with us today. I am so grateful to have you as a partner in the Senate, and appreciate the time you're taking to talk to folks here in San Diego, and all the work you're doing for our state. I think the fact that you are doing this town hall is really a testament to the way that you show up for our entire state. You make sure every community knows that they have you as a representative and a fighter for us in that crazy body called the Senate that's just to the other side of the Capitol from where I work. So thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, John, Janice, Oscar, and Abigail, for your questions, and to everyone who submitted questions. I know we didn't get time to get through them all, but each of our offices will be hosting more town halls, and we'll try and answer as many of your other questions as possible. And as always, feel free to send them in. I know on my website and on Senator Padilla's website, you can send us messages and we will try and answer. You can also reach out to my San Diego office at 619-280-5353. Please also subscribe to my newsletter, shameless plug, so that my team and I can keep you updated on all of our work in the district and in DC, and we can let you know when the next town hall will be. And finally, if you know someone who would benefit from any of this information but wasn't able to join, the recording will be available on Facebook and on YouTube shortly. So feel free to check that out, and also make sure you go to both Senator Padilla's website and my website, which is sarahjacobs.house.gov. That's Sarah with no H. I will remind you all in case you accidentally feel like you're not able to get to my website. But thank you all again so much. I'm so honored to be doing this work with you, Senator Padilla. I'm so honored to be representing all of you who were tuning in, and I hope you all stay safe and stay healthy and have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you,
everybody.